The CEO of one of the largest companies in the city was sitting in his luxurious office, staring at the skyline. Thinking about how successful he had become, he had everything that people usually dream of: big house, fast cars, power, and respect. But despite all of it, he felt a strange emptiness inside. He had built his company from the ground up, hired hundreds of employees, and seen profits soar year after year. But lately, he had begun to wonder about the people who actually work for him. He realized that he knew very little about them, how they lived, what challenges they faced, and how they really felt about their work. His meetings were full of numbers, charts, and reports, but they never showed the real life behind the walls of his company. Late one evening, while reading through employee performance reports, he noticed a recurring theme. Many employees were labeled as underperforming or average, yet the numbers didn't tell the full story. He wondered if there were things happening behind the scenes that he was missing, maybe moments of hard work, dedication, or even struggles that no one reported. A thought struck him suddenly. Maybe the best way to understand his employees wasn't from his office, but by seeing life from their perspective. The idea was bold, risky, and unusual, but it excited him. What if he could go undercover, experience life as an ordinary employee, and observe everything without anyone knowing who he really was? It wasn't about spying or punishing anyone, he reminded himself. It was about understanding, empathy, and seeing the real heartbeat of his company for the first time in years. He felt a spark of curiosity and adventure, something different from signing deals or approving budgets. He wanted a witness. The effort, struggles, and dedication that often went unnoticed. He wanted to know who his employees really were, not just as workers, but as people. He spent hours imagining how he could pull it off. He would need a disguise, maybe a uniform, a new name, and a way to blend in without attracting attention. The thought of walking the halls as an ordinary custodian made him nervous, but the excitement outweighed the fear. He pictured himself mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and chatting casually with employees, trying to see life through their eyes. Every scenario he imagined brought both humor and humility. He knew it wouldn't be easy, and he could make mistakes, but that was part of the journey. He thought about the impact it could have. Not only would he gain insight into the work environment, but he could also discover hidden talents, dedication, and stories of employees who deserve recognition. He realized he had been living in a bubble, surrounded by people who reported only what they thought he wanted to hear, and this experiment would shatter that bubble. It would give him a real perspective, one that no report or meeting could ever provide. The more he thought about it, the more determined he became. He imagined the faces of employees he had walked past countless times, never knowing their struggles, celebrations, or moments of kindness. He remembered the janitors, cafeteria workers, and maintenance staff whose work kept the company running smoothly. Often unnoticed and unappreciated, he wondered how many stories of dedication he had missed, and that thought pushed him forward. By the end of the night, he had made up his mind he would step out of his office, leave behind the title of CEO for a while, and step into the shoes of a custodian. It would be a journey of discovery, humility, and understanding. He knew it would change the way he viewed his company, his employees, and even himself. It was more than just curiosity. It was a chance to connect with the people who made his company what it was, to learn lessons that no board meeting could teach. As he prepared for the days ahead, he felt a mix of excitement, fear, and anticipation. He knew there would be challenges, funny moments, and surprises. But he also knew that this decision was the right one. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive, ready to discover a world he had ignored for years, and ready to see the heart of his company like never before. The next morning, the CEO woke up earlier than usual, his mind buzzing with anticipation and a little nervousness. He had planned this undercover journey for weeks, but now that it was real, he could feel his heart racing. He looked at the uniform laid out neatly on the chair. A simple custodian outfit with a name tag that read Sam. It felt strange to imagine himself wearing it. He ran his fingers over the fabric, realizing how different this would be from his tailored suits and polished shoes. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that this was about learning, not pretending, and he needed to do it right. As he stepped into the uniform, he noticed how ordinary he felt, almost invisible. The mirror reflected a man who looked completely different from the powerful CEO everyone knew. He tugged at the sleeves nervously, adjusted the hat, and practiced a casual walk, trying to blend in as if he belonged. He even practiced a simple greeting, morning, imagining how he would interact with employees without raising suspicion. The more he prepared, the more he felt a mix of excitement and humility. Arriving at the company's early morning shift, he joined the cleaning staff quietly, feeling every eye glance past him without noticing anything unusual. It was his first real test, walking the hallways, pushing the mop bucket, and emptying trash bins while observing employees in their natural environment. He noticed the small details he had never paid attention to before: the creases in tired uniforms, the careful way a worker carried fragile equipment, the quiet nods exchanged between co-workers. Each action told a story of dedication, struggle, and teamwork that he had overlooked from his office window. He tried to perform the tasks like a regular custodian, and immediately realized it wasn't as easy as it looked. Pushing the heavy mop bucket made his arms ache, bending to pick up trash made his back strain, and climbing stairs with cleaning supplies left him out of breath. He smiled at the irony of being humbled by tasks he had considered simple. Meanwhile, employees passed by him, some chatting with each other, some focused on their work, and they treated him like any other worker, not a CEO. In disguise, he noticed how they supported each other, holding doors, sharing tools, and exchanging quiet encouragements, and it made him realize how much teamwork actually kept the company running. By mid-morning, he had already seen things that surprised him. He observed a young employee quietly helping a colleague fix a broken machine. Even though it wasn't his responsibility, he saw a worker comforting another who had received bad news while still completing their tasks. And he noticed how many small efforts went unrecognized. His mind was opening to a world he had never experienced, and it made him reflect on how disconnected he had been from the lives of his employees. During his lunch break, he sat quietly in the cafeteria, listening to conversations and trying not to reveal anything. Employees spoke freely about challenges at work and at home, sharing struggles, jokes, and ideas. Some talked about how they wished management understood the effort behind every task, and he felt a pang of guilt for not knowing sooner. He realized that no performance report could ever capture the human side of work. The moments he was witnessing were authentic, raw, and full of life. The rest of the day passed with a mix of awkwardness, humor, and small victories. He learned how to empty recycling bins without spilling, how to move equipment carefully, and how to communicate with employees naturally. Sometimes he tripped or spilled water, drawing smiles or chuckles from passing coworkers. But those small moments made him feel more connected, more human, and less like a distant boss by the end of the shift. He was exhausted, his body sore, but his heart was full of understanding, appreciation, and curiosity. As he returned home that evening, he reflected on everything he had seen. He realized that the real story of his company was not in the reports or charts, but in the dedication, struggles, and kindness of his employees. He felt a deep respect for every person he had worked alongside that day, from the custodians to the office assistants. Each of them had a story, and he had only just begun to understand them. He knew that the transformation wasn't just about the uniform or the work. It was about perspective, empathy, and seeing life from another's shoes. And as he prepared for the next day, he felt a mix of excitement and anticipation, eager to discover more, learn more, and understand the heartbeat of the company he had built. He was ready to see what other surprises, lessons, and hidden stories awaited him on this extraordinary undercover journey. On his second day undercover, the CEO felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness as he walked through the company doors wearing his custodian uniform. He had begun to settle into the rhythm of his new role, but today felt different. He was determined to observe more, to notice the things he had missed yesterday, and to understand the world of his employees beyond just their tasks. He pushed the mop cart down the hallway slowly, trying to appear casual, while his eyes scanned everything. Around him, every smile, every sigh, every quick gesture of help seemed suddenly important. He stopped by the main office area and watched employees at their desks. Some were typing quickly, focused on urgent deadlines. Others whispered quietly, exchanging ideas or small jokes to lighten the stress. he noticed a young woman struggling to reach a high shelf. And without hesitation, a male colleague stepped in to help her. They didn't announce it. They didn't seek recognition. It was just a small act of teamwork. And the CEO felt a rush of admiration. He realized that these simple acts were the backbone of the company, things no report or meeting could ever capture. As he continued down the halls, he overheard conversations about personal challenges, some employees worried about family issues, some about deadlines, and some shared small victories, like finishing a difficult project or helping a colleague through a problem. He was struck by how much trust existed among the team, how employees confided in each other in ways they never would with him in the office. It became clear to him that the real heart of the company was not in the boardroom, but in these everyday moments. During a break, he noticed a janitor quietly helping a new employee understand the cleaning routine, showing patience, kindness, and guidance. No one had told this employee to do it. It came from genuine care. The CEO felt a wave of humility, realizing that leadership existed at every level, not just in titles or offices. These first impressions were opening his eyes to a level of dedication and human connection he had never experienced. In the cafeteria, he sat at a table with employees he had never spoken to, listening to their conversations. He learned about their lives outside work, their dreams, their struggles, and even their small frustrations. Some spoke about wishing management noticed the effort behind every task, and he felt a twinge of guilt for not seeing it before. He realized that leadership was not just about giving orders or approving projects. It was about understanding the people who carried the company forward. The CEO also noticed moments of quiet determination. A worker repairing a broken machine alone, another staying late to finish paperwork, and even small acts of courage like someone speaking up about a problem in a gentle but firm way. Every detail mattered, and he began taking mental notes, not to judge or report, but to truly understand the lives of his employees. He began to see patterns, the teamwork, the resilience, and the unseen efforts that made the company function. By the end of the day, he had experienced small victories of his own, managing his tasks better, learning names, and earning brief smiles or nods of respect from colleagues. But the greatest victory was the insight he had gained. He realized that employees were not just workers. They were humans with stories, emotions, and hidden strengths. He had underestimated the depth of connection, trust, and dedication that existed in his company. As he left the building that evening, tired but thoughtful, he reflected on everything he had seen. He understood that these first impressions were just the beginning, that there was so much more to discover, and that each day would reveal more stories, more acts of kindness, and more lessons about empathy, teamwork, and leadership. For the first time, he felt that being a custodian was more than a disguise. It was a window into the soul of the company, and he was eager to see what the next days would teach him. By the fourth day of his undercover journey, the CEO was beginning to feel a deeper connection to the company he had built. He had started noticing patterns, the small efforts, and the quiet teamwork. But today, something felt heavier, more serious, as he walked the familiar halls pushing his mop cart. His eyes caught subtle signs of struggle that he hadn't noticed before, the tired expressions, the rushed movements, and the small sighs of stress. It was a side of his employees' lives he had never imagined, and it made him pause. In the maintenance area, he saw an employee struggling to carry a heavy load alone. He wanted to step in, but he reminded himself to observe, letting the scene unfold naturally. The man's face was strained, his uniform damp with sweat, and yet he moved steadily, refusing help. The CEO realized that many employees carried invisible burdens, responsibilities outside of work that weighed on them. Yet they showed up every day, performing their tasks with dedication and pride. It was humbling to witness. Later, in the break room, he overheard a conversation between two employees. One was worried about a sick child at home, the other about a spouse who had lost a job. They spoke quietly but with honesty, revealing challenges that had nothing to do with work but affected their performance. The CEO felt a pang of guilt for never asking, never caring enough to know what each employee faced. He began to understand that numbers on a report could never capture this reality, that empathy was more important than statistics. As he continued his rounds, he noticed an employee quietly wiping tears behind a corner of the building. The custodian instinctively approached to offer help, but the employee shook his head, whispering that it was just stress. The CEO felt his chest tighten, realizing that people often carried emotional weight alone, without support from those above them. It was a perspective he had never truly experienced, and it made him reflect on how leadership should involve care, not just oversight. He saw employees juggling tasks that went beyond their job descriptions, handling emergencies, covering for absent colleagues, and still managing to smile and greet others. The dedication was remarkable. And yet, it came with a quiet struggle that no one acknowledged publicly. It was clear that the company thrived not just because of talent or systems, but because of people who gave more than what was asked, often silently and without recognition. During the afternoon, the CEO helped clean a storage room and struck up a casual conversation with a young woman sorting supplies. She shared, without realizing he was the CEO, how she worried about making ends meet, how she stayed late to finish tasks, and how she often felt unnoticed despite giving her best. Each word she spoke added a layer to his understanding. He felt both admiration and regret. Admiration for her resilience and regret for not noticing earlier. As the day ended, the CEO walked to the exit slowly, exhausted not just physically but emotionally. He had seen courage, determination, and hidden struggles that no boardroom could ever reveal. He realized that leadership wasn't about orders or strategy alone. It was about seeing people, understanding them, and supporting them through the hidden challenges of their lives. This day had shown him that his employees were human, with dreams, fears, and burdens, and that true respect came from recognizing that truth. That evening, he sat alone in his small apartment, reflecting on everything he had witnessed. The hidden struggles he had seen weighed on him, but they also inspired him. He knew that the real work of a CEO wasn't just managing profits. It was understanding the human side of the company. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to continue his undercover journey, eager to uncover more stories of resilience, courage, and quiet heroism among his employees. He had learned that the heart of a company beats in the unseen moments, the hidden struggles, and the quiet determination of people who give their all every single day. By the fifth day of his undercover journey, the CEO felt a quiet anticipation as he stepped into the building. He had already seen the hard work, the hidden struggles, and the dedication of his employees. But today, he wanted to observe something different. He wanted to see the moments that often went unnoticed, the small acts of kindness that built the invisible threads holding the company together. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed a senior employee stopping to help a new worker carry a heavy box of supplies. The new employee struggled, his arms shaking under the weight, and the senior simply smiled and offered a hand without saying a word. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes about the culture of support among employees. The CEO felt a warm feeling in his chest, realizing that these small acts of care were the real glue of the company. Later, in the break room, he witnessed a remarkable scene. An employee quietly slipped a cup of coffee to a colleague who had forgotten theirs. Without anyone noticing, the colleague smiled, whispered a quick "thank you," and returned to work. The CEO realized that these tiny moments of thoughtfulness created bonds that were stronger than any formal recognition. It was a world where people genuinely looked out for one another, not for reward, but because it was the right thing to do. As he moved through the office, he saw a young woman helping an older coworker fix a computer problem. The older employee looked frustrated, but the young woman patiently guided her step by step. Never showing impatience, she stayed after her own tasks to make sure the problem was solved, and the CEO was struck by the generosity of her time and effort. These acts weren't required. No one would ever report them. Yet they made the workplace a better, more compassionate place. In the maintenance area, he noticed a quiet exchange. A custodian had found a lost wallet in the hallway, and instead of ignoring it, he handed it over to security, making sure it returned to its owner. The small act of honesty went unnoticed by most, but the CEO saw it, and he realized how integrity was woven into the daily lives of employees in ways he had never acknowledged before. He understood that these moments of kindness, trust, and honesty were the soul of the company, and they could not be measured on a spreadsheet. During lunch, he shared a table with a few employees, listening quietly as they laughed and shared stories. One told how a coworker had secretly paid for her lunch when she had forgotten her wallet. Another described how a colleague had stayed late to help with the project without asking for recognition. Each story revealed acts of compassion, patience, and generosity that were invisible to management. And yet they were what made the team feel like a family. The CEO felt something shift inside him, a deep appreciation for the people he had hired, the ones he had overlooked for so long. He realized that the true power of a company was not in its products or profits, but in the way employees cared for each other, supported each other, and lifted one another during hard times. These moments of kindness were more valuable than any award or bonus, and they had the power to inspire, to motivate, and to build loyalty in ways he had never considered. As the day came to a close, he reflected on everything he had witnessed, from helping a colleague with a difficult task to small gestures of generosity. The acts of kindness he saw were quiet, simple, yet incredibly powerful. He felt a deep sense of humility and gratitude, knowing that he had underestimated the humanity of his employees for so long. He left the building tired but uplifted, with a heart full of appreciation, ready to continue his undercover journey and see what other surprising lessons awaited him. By the sixth day of his undercover journey, the CEO had begun to feel at home in his custodian role. He knew the routines, the employees' faces, and even their small habits. But he didn't expect the day to bring a revelation that would shake him to his core. He had spent days observing dedication, teamwork, and kindness, but today, something happened that made him realize there were things happening in his company that no one above him had ever seen. It started when he was asked to help move a stack of files from the storage room to the main office. As he carried the heavy boxes, he noticed a small folder tucked behind some papers. Curious, he picked it up and saw that it contained notes from employees about problems they had been facing, safety hazards, equipment malfunctions, and work conditions that had been ignored for months. The CEO's heart sank as he realized that these issues had been silently affecting employees' health, efficiency, and morale, and no one had ever reported them formally. Later, as he walked through the warehouse area, he overheard two employees talking quietly. One of them revealed how they had repeatedly asked for help with a dangerous machine that occasionally malfunctioned, causing injuries that were luckily minor so far. The other employee admitted they had been afraid to speak up to management, fearing consequences or being ignored. The CEO froze, realizing that he had unknowingly allowed risks to continue, and the thought made him feel both guilty and determined to make things right. During his routine tasks, he noticed a group of employees working together to solve a problem that had been overlooked by management. They had stayed after hours for several days, quietly coordinating with one another and even improvising tools to get the work done safely. He watched in silence, amazed at their ingenuity and commitment. And he understood for the first time that leadership was not just about giving instructions, but about noticing, listening, and supporting the people who carried the company forward. As the day went on, the CEO saw more small but shocking things. He noticed employees bending safety rules, not out of laziness, but because there were no proper resources or support to do the tasks safely. He saw people sacrificing their own comfort and time, and even risking minor injuries to make sure the work was completed. It was a wake-up call that made him realize how disconnected he had been from the realities of his own company, and how much he had taken for granted. During a short break, he sat quietly in the cafeteria, reflecting on what he had seen, and a young employee approached him, talking about a personal struggle that had affected her work performance. She spoke with honesty, trusting that her coworkers would listen and support her. He felt a deep emotional impact, understanding that these were not just stories of struggle. They were stories of courage, resilience, and hope. The revelation hit him hard. Employees were giving their best, sometimes silently suffering and often going beyond what anyone asked of them, and yet their voices were barely heard at the top. By the end of the day, he realized that the company was full of unsung heroes, people who solved problems, helped each other, and risked themselves quietly without recognition. The CEO felt a mixture of shock, humility, and gratitude. He had uncovered a hidden world, one that no reports, emails, or meetings could ever reveal, and he understood that this revelation would change him forever. As he walked home that evening, exhausted but enlightened, he knew that his role as a leader could no longer be the same. He had seen the truth, and it demanded action. He had learned that real leadership was about noticing the unseen, listening to the unheard, and valuing the people whose efforts often went unnoticed. The day had revealed the soul of his company in a way that no office or boardroom ever could, and he was determined to honor it. By the seventh day of his undercover journey, the CEO felt a new sense of clarity as he entered the building. The days of observation, discovery, and reflection had changed him. He no longer saw his employees as names on a report or numbers on a chart. He saw them as real people, with real stories, real struggles, and real kindness. But today felt different, because he was beginning to understand what he needed to do with everything he had learned. As he moved through the hallways, he noticed small interactions he had seen before, but this time, they struck him differently. A worker helped a colleague carry a heavy load, another shared tips to make a difficult task easier, and a young employee comforted someone who seemed upset. The CEO realized that the company thrived not just because of strategy or technology, but because of empathy, teamwork, and care that existed quietly between employees. It was humbling, and it made him think about how disconnected management had been from this reality. During lunch, he sat alone at a quiet corner of the cafeteria, replaying the last week in his mind. He thought about the hidden struggles he had witnessed, the acts of kindness he had seen, and the shocking revelation about safety and overlooked problems. He realized that if he truly wanted to be a good leader, he could no longer remain in his office, shielded by authority. He had to take action, and he had to start by acknowledging the people who made the company what it was. He decided to approach a few trusted employees cautiously, those whose honesty he had seen firsthand. He revealed his identity to them in private, and their reactions ranged from shock to disbelief, but also to relief. They had longed for someone in leadership to notice, to listen, and to understand. And finally, they felt seen. The employees shared more details about their work, their challenges, and their small victories. And the CEO listened intently, realizing how much he had missed while sitting in his office. By the afternoon, the CEO had begun making small changes. Even while still undercover, he helped fix equipment properly, suggested solutions to minor problems, and quietly encouraged employees who had been working tirelessly without recognition. His actions were subtle, but they sent a message, and he noticed small sparks of motivation and hope in his coworkers' eyes. It was a turning point for him, understanding that leadership was not just about decisions made in meetings, but about being present, aware, and compassionate. As the day drew to a close, he reflected on the week-long journey. He had witnessed courage, patience, generosity, and ingenuity, and he knew that these qualities were what truly powered his company. He felt a renewed commitment to change the way management interacted with employees, to ensure their voices were heard, their efforts recognized, and their struggles supported. He understood that this turning point was not just personal, but organizational, and it would shape the future of the company in profound ways. Walking out of the building that evening, he felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had learned that being a leader was about more than titles, profits, or authority. It was about empathy, listening, and connecting with people on a human level. He was ready to reveal the truth, to take the lessons from his undercover journey and use them to transform not only the company, but the way he led. He felt a sense of purpose he had never felt before, knowing that the discoveries he had made would soon inspire change and recognition for the employees who had quietly held the company together. The turning point was clear. The CEO understood that the final step of his journey would be the most challenging and rewarding, revealing his true identity to the entire team and showing them that he truly valued and appreciated them. This revelation would mark the end of his undercover experience, but the beginning of a new era of leadership, respect, and connection. He walked home that evening with a heart full of hope and determination, ready for the moment when he would finally step out of disguise. The final day of his undercover journey had arrived, and the CEO felt a mix of excitement, nervousness, and anticipation as he entered the building. He had spent a week walking in the shoes of Custodian, witnessing dedication, kindness, hidden struggles, and quiet heroism. And now, it was time to take the last step, revealing the truth. He had thought about this moment for days, imagining reactions ranging from shock to laughter and even fear, but he knew it had to be done, not as a trick, but as a gesture of appreciation and understanding. He began his day like any other, pushing the mop cart, greeting employees with a casual morning, and observing their routines. But there was a different feeling in the air. He could see subtle signs of curiosity from his colleagues. Some glanced at him with quiet smiles, others with puzzled expressions, as if sensing something unusual. The CEO felt his heart race, knowing that soon, every mystery, every secret he had carried as Sam the Custodian would be revealed. During a brief morning break, he gathered a few employees he had connected with directly, the ones whose honesty, struggles, and dedication had moved him the most. He spoke to them privately, thanking them for their work, listening to their stories again, and preparing them for the big reveal. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they realized who he really was. And then, slowly, understanding and admiration replaced the shock. They had never expected the CEO to know them, to see them, to understand the challenges they faced every single day. By midday, he decided it was time to reveal his identity to the entire team. He called for a quick meeting, asking everyone to gather in the main hall. And as employees assembled, whispers and speculation filled the air. The CEO walked in casually, still in his custodian uniform, and waited for silence. Then, with a calm but firm voice, he spoke, revealing that he had spent the past week undercover to truly understand the people who made the company run. The employees froze in shock, and a wave of murmurs spread across the room. He spoke from the heart, telling them what he had seen. The acts of kindness, the struggles, the courage, and the dedication that went unnoticed. He acknowledged mistakes in management, promised to support them better, and explained that the experience had changed him. It wasn't a speech about profits or titles. It was a heartfelt appreciation of every employee, and it resonated deeply. He could see smiles, tears, and nods of understanding as people realized that the CEO had truly walked in their shoes. One by one, employees came forward to share their experiences, their surprises, and their gratitude. They laughed about small moments, recounted hidden efforts, and even expressed relief that someone at the top finally understood. The CEO listened quietly, feeling a mix of pride, humility, and deep emotional connection. He realized that this moment was more powerful than any meeting, email, or report could ever be. The human connection he had sought was finally there, palpable in the room, alive and real. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the company had shifted. The employees felt recognized, valued, and appreciated, and the CEO felt transformed. He knew that the company would never be the same, not because of policies or procedures, but because the culture had been strengthened by empathy, understanding, and genuine appreciation. He smiled as he walked out that evening, leaving behind the custodian uniform, knowing that the lessons he had learned would shape his leadership forever. The revelation had been more than a surprise. It had been a bridge between leadership and humanity, one that would continue to inspire and guide the company for years to come. As he looked at the skyline that evening, he thought about the journey he had taken, from curiosity to discovery, from empathy to understanding, and finally, to recognition. He had begun as a CEO seeking answers, but he had ended as a leader who truly saw his people. Their dedication, kindness, and courage had left him speechless, and yet filled him with hope, inspiration, and determination. The journey was over, but the impact would last a lifetime, and the company, now more connected and compassionate than ever, was ready for a brighter future.